first welcome, a huge welcome to you. If we haven't met before, my name's Rebecca. I'm one of the clergy here at Holy Trinity, and it is wonderful to come together on one of our summer Sundays to brave the heat together. I can see some fans out. I appreciate that. I wish I had a fan. If you are new, maybe you're new to Dublin, or you're looking for a church family or just visiting, you are particularly welcome. We're so thrilled you're here. Particularly if you are wondering if this is a place you might call home, there are a few things you can do to just get to know us a little bit and to, maybe ask some questions. So the first thing is stay after the service for a cup of tea or coffee. We will also be heading over to the green over here. There'll be a little convoy of us going over straight after the service for a picnic. So do stick around for that. I know people over the past few summers that we've done that who have been new, particularly over the summer, and they've come to those picnics, one or more of those, and they've really found it an amazing point just of connection, of getting to know a couple of people and of feeling, connected in when it's a bit of a funny few months over the summer where people are away and you're seeing different faces every week. So particularly if you're new, maybe head down to Tesco or wherever and pick up a little sandwich and come along, or there'll be loads of food to share, I'm sure. Also, if you're new, you can head to the website. There's an I'm new form on there. You can fill in your details, or we have little cards that you can do the old-fashioned way, and one of the team will get in touch with you if you'd like, or you can just sign up for the newsletter. There's a little tick on there, and the newsletter goes out every week just with all the information about what's happening in the life of the church every week. So do sign up for that as well, to stay up to date for that. If you are a parent or a carer, or you're here with kids, our younger kids have already headed out, obviously. Our older kids are staying in today. There's a great little activities station at the back. You can go and get clipboards and all sorts of things during the service, and we'll be listening to Scott together as well. So I mentioned that throughout July, we're doing Summer Sunday picnics. So that will be, like I said, after every Sunday service in July, a group of us will be heading down for games and food after the service. So do plan for that over the next few weeks. And just to say, to put it in your diaries, on the 10th of August, which is about a month from now, we're going to be having our annual all-family barbecue. We've done this now for 2 or 3 years, I think, and we basically we get all the barbecues going, and again, we're over on the green, and from all of our congregations, there's loads of us who just gather, and we have an amazing barbecue, bring and share. So from about next week, I think we're going to open up sign-ups for that, because we'll provide all the barbecue meat and all veggie stuff, and then everyone else will bring sides, so just so we know for numbers. Yes. And a helpful note on here, tea and coffee is available. Oh, you can't stay for tea and coffee after the service. Right, this is what happens when you've been away for a few weeks. I'm so sorry if you're new. You will not be able to stay after the service for tea or coffee, because there is none, but you can stay for the picnic. So tea and coffee between the two services, Gordon, is that right? Okay, so do come early if you need your caffeine. Come and grab a cup of tea and coffee. It's a great opportunity as well to get to know people from our previous congregation who stay on for that as well. All right. Like I said, in a second, we're going to hand over to Scott. But first of all, we're going to have just a moment of giving. We have this in every service because we believe that giving is part of our worship. It's a way of us being grateful for all that God gives us, and an opportunity for us to give back in every way, of our time, our gifts, our resources, but in this moment, financially. And so we have some little prayers, a prayer that we say together every week, just to remind us why we give. So let's say these words together. Lord, everything we have comes from you. So we respond in worship by giving these gifts and our lives back to you for the glory of your name. Amen. So particularly if you're new, please do let the baskets pass you by. And as always, there's no pressure at all to give. But if you would like to, the baskets are going to go by in a second. There's also QR codes on the back of the seats. And many of you give by standing order online as well, monthly, which is amazing. So in a second, Scott is going to come up. But before that, we're going to just have our 2-minute break for the offering, and turn to someone and say, what's been the best thing that you've done in the sun over the last week? Or maybe your top tip for a summer Dublin trip in the sun. And then over to Scott in a second.
2. Yeah. Okay, so we'll invite you to draw your conversations to a close for now, or to a pause. That's good work on the doors. That's quite nice, actually. Yeah. I felt like you, Rebecca, you've been catching your breath the whole service, haven't you? So, no, nice to get the air in. So, guys, we're nearly there on our Galatians. It's one of our longest sermon series. It's we're number 9 of 10 sessions on it, so we're nearly there. Rebecca will be winding us down next week, landing it. So we are nearly there, and we'll be looking at Galatians chapter 5, and the Galatians, the letter is 6 chapters, so we're getting closer. And for this chunk, we're Galatians chapter 5, verse 2 to 26, and I'm going to break it up into sections, so we can kind of go read a section and talk through it, and read section, talk through it. So these are what I'm suggesting as the sections. So we're going to be looking at a kind of reminder or a recap. So we'll be looking at the first section, verse 2 to 12, is very similar to some of the themes we've already kind of covered, I suppose. So maybe that'll be helpful for some of us. Yeah, and I think what maybe I've experienced, I don't know about you guys who've stuck with us, it's quite repetitive, isn't there? And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, but it's been kind of these themes of freedom, themes of grace, themes of kind of law and legalism, but I think it's been so helpful getting different perspectives on that. And then the next thing we'll be looking at is, freedom and love, and then the struggle, and then something about fruit at the end. So let's read the first section anyway there together. So that's verse 2 to 12. Listen, I, Paul, am telling you that if you let yourselves be circumcised, Christ will be of no benefit to you. Once again, I testify to every man who lets himself be circumcised that he is obliged to obey the entire law. You want to be justified by the law? Those who have been justified by the law have cut themselves off from Christ. You've fallen away from grace. For through the Spirit by faith, we eagerly wait for the hope of righteousness. For in Christ Jesus, neither circumcision nor non-circumcision counts for anything. The only thing that counts is faith, working through love. You are running well. Who prevented you from obeying the truth? Such persuasion does not come from the one who calls you. A little yeast leavens the whole batch of dough. I'm confident about you in the Lord that you will not think otherwise. But whoever it is that is confusing you will pay the penalty. But my friends, why am I still being persecuted if I'm still preaching circumcision? In that case, the offense of the cross has been removed. I wish those who unsettle you would castrate themselves. Come on, Paul. So, this is a real reminder, what a strange world we were entering in Galatians. And in the very first talk, Rebecca reminded us of that, using the BBC travel thing of them going into these really foreign countries and how do they navigate. And I think we've had some amazing talks and they're online to figure out, what does all this mean? Why is Scott talking about circumcision and lands with castration? It's mad stuff. And we've looked at things like Jewish culture, we looked at things like law and legalism, we've talked about Abraham, circumcision. Last week we talked about Hagar and Sarah, all these things. So I think just that first section really reminds me of all these sort of things we've been looking at. I think that this is very strange. I think it's a reminder of some of the key themes. I think I love that verse. I think it sums up in verse 6. In first Christ Jesus, neither circumcision nor uncircumcision. So this idea, neither the Jews who circumcise or the Jewish Christians or the gentle Christians, that doesn't matter. Those external things doesn't matter. Whatever you do doesn't matter. What counts is this faith working itself through. And that word working is an energy kind of Greek word. So it's the energy of faith energizing it through love. That's what counts. We've done lots of thinking about that, what it means. We don't need to do anything to be accepted by God, to be his child. And Dilla spoke beautifully about reading that Father's love letter. Colin reminded us that we are children of an Abba God, that we don't have to pursue perfection or anything like that. Ruth reminded us of that gift of grace for us. We no longer have to justify our existence by being good, We don't have to justify being successful enough, good looking enough, holy enough. All those nuffs are finished, as Jesus says on the cross, it is finished. So all these really good stuff that we've been really reminding ourselves of. And then finally, I think we're reminding exactly of Paul's passion. You know, we've read at the start, he talks about Galatians being foolish, you Galatians, or he's talked about, who's bewitched you, or I'm perplexed. And now he's gone on a mad one about castration and stuff. And I can imagine like him probably dictating this. Sometimes he says, I wrote this bit by hand. Other times he's thinking out. And you just feel his passion and his love and his anger at times. Apathy is sort of the opposite of love. Anger can be a sign of love. That the thing that they had that freed them, the thing that he is going to end up dying for. Many of all Jesus' followers nearly died from this. They lost their lives for this amazing good news. And you're throwing it away. What are you doing, guys? And he's so angry and cross with the people who are saying, no, you have to do this Jewish law for that. But I love this kind of stream of consciousness. It's mad stuff. Like, first of all, he uses a running metaphor. You were running well. Okay, we're on a running metaphor. And then he jumps into a baking metaphor. Little yeast leavens the bread, and then he jumps into kind of his own kind of worldview. Like it's just his passion is there. It's just like a stream of consciousness. And so when you read the letter, you can see Paul's passion throughout the letter. When we read Galatians, we can see this is a strange world, but at work we can unpack it. And I suppose as we read it, we get these key themes of being saved, being free, but nothing we have to do. We don't have to be successful. The drive for success, the drive for perfection, we can let that all go. And that freedom. And there's this idea, it's a sort of a psychotherapy idea called aboutism. And this idea about aboutism is that you can know about something, but not really know it. We can know about God's grace and faith, but do we actually let it in and integrate into our lives? I think the more and more educated we are, the more access to information, we can know about so many things. We can know about God's love and grace and mercy, but have we allowed it sort of integrated in all aspects of our lives? And a little bit I think the Spirit is leading us as a church is how we can integrate it in all our aspects of our lives. Freedom and love. So he sort of shifts gear into less sort of stream of consciousness, into kind of more some key themes for us to look at. Verse 13. For you were called to freedom, brothers and sisters. Only do not use your freedom as an opportunity for self-indulgence, but through love become slaves to one another. For the whole law is summed up in a single commandment. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. If, however, you bite and devour one another, take care that you are not consumed by one another. So in a way, for most of the letter of Galatians, Paul is saying, don't lose this freedom you've had. You've had this freedom, you're almost losing it. But now he's sort of trying to shift gear towards the end. So like 5-6 of it, he's kind of like most of the Galatians, he's sort of saying, don't lose this freedom. Why have you lost this freedom? Now he's sort of saying, don't abuse this freedom. It's a slightly kind of thing, how do we find this balance? And freedom provides this dilemma. I don't know if you're a parent or just in life, how do you find the balance? Too much freedom, it's chaos, it's danger. Too little freedom, it's rigid, it's constricted, and has its own dangers. So how do we find this? And you see this in society. How do you have the balance between giving people freedom through history? It's like, let's kill this dictator, and we destroy that, and then a new dictator comes up. Yippee, the king is dead. Oh, long live the king. This sort of cycle, and we can see this in our own lives. How do we find this sense of freedom that we can be free to do whatever we want in some ways, and yet we know that's not the answer either. It can lead to chaos. And I think sometimes maybe the Christian good news is sometimes like we just think about freedom from guilt, freedom from sin, freedom from the consequences of just trying harder. And that's one type of freedom which is true, but we're also freedom for something. What are we free for? What's the purpose of freedom? And how do we find that dilemma of this, if you think about we want to go out and see a wild bear, and that's free and exciting, but if that bear attacks you, it's not very good. So we go see a bear in the zoo, and you're like, oh, that's not very good. So how do we find this faith and freedom that doesn't domesticate it and enclose it, but let this freedom that just runs amok? How do we find that dilemma? And philosophers and people have all tried to find it, and Paul has the answer. He says it's the purpose of freedom is to love. If we can find love, that will be our kind of guardrails. That will be our kind of meaning for how we use our freedom. Eugene Peterson said this in his kind of commentary. He says, the best way, the only way finally of expressing the life of freedom is an act of love. Only love expresses freedom in ways that enhance rather than destroy, in ways that enliven rather than deaden. So a little kind of idea is about a bicycle. Every good bicycle needs two wheels. And so like this, I think freedom and love have to be both existing at one time. Because you see, it says here that if we lose one, we lose the other at the same time. Just like a bike, if you take one wheel out, it's very hard to cycle a bike. So if we just focus on freedom without love, Paul talks about this idea of consuming relationships. He says here, doesn't he, in verse 15, if, however, you bite and devour one another, take care that you are not consumed by one another. What interesting imagery of eating and consuming and biting. It's this idea that I have freedom. I have freedom. So without love, I'll use my freedom because of whatever I want. And we can go into this concept of kind of using people, almost objectifying people. I'll hang out with you because you make me look good. I'll hang out with you because you're enjoyable to be with. I'll hang out with you because it's just easier. And like, I will use you to feed my ego. I will use you to kind of get what I need to consume you. And we end up objectifying human souls if we just live this life of freedom, pure freedom, do whatever I want, I don't care about anybody. But we also know without freedom, love doesn't really exist, does it? We know that true love of giving of ourselves to other people has to be in a context of freedom. And the greatest commandment, like, you should love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and you should love your neighbor as you love yourself. And that beautiful aspect of to love my neighbors less than myself, unfortunately, is to treat them as a means to my end. But also to love them is more, which set them up using me as a means to their ends. So this idea of having that balance of freedom and love is so important. I think sometimes more and more, I think in our individual society and this sort of pursuit of freedom is so ingrained now in our culture that we forget this other aspect that we need to have freedom as well. We need to have love as well as freedom. See, freedom and love don't just complement each other, it completes each other. You don't lose your freedom when you love deeply. You discover it has a purpose. And so Paul is saying, don't lose your freedom as an opportunity for self-indulgence. So what is your go-to in self-indulgence? What's the one that you go to? I'm going to speak about the one I go to all the time, is what I like to call splendid isolation. I love being on my own. I love the lack of responsibility. I love that I can wrap it up as a holy thing. Oh, Scott's so holy, he's going on a retreat, or Scott's so holy, he has his quiet times. I just love being on my own. It's lovely, free of responsibilities. And, life comes up, doesn't it? And a marriage sort of helps that one a bit. So we had to realize quite early on, so when we actually had this idea that we'd have breakfast every morning and I'd be all chat. That didn't happen. But it kind of helped me a little bit go, okay, no, I need to connect a bit more. Then a mortgage just sort of doesn't really give you that much freedom, does it? You have to have a certain job to have a certain income. And then good old kids, Leighton and Phoebe, have decided to come in, but that again kind of brings that freedom away from that splendid isolation. We were at the beach yesterday, and every time I heard a kid say, Dad, I was on alert. No, I'll put the Kindle back again. Okay. For some people, maybe freedom is more kind of different than that. But this has always been sort of, I suppose it's an idealized of just going off into the distance, hiking, letting all responsibilities go. And that's the meaning of life, is just to be free. I don't know if anyone ever watched that movie, Into the Wild. This really kind of idolized this idea of a guy. It's a true story of a guy in the 90s, a guy called, I'm going to watch a little clip at the moment. This guy called Chris. And he's in his early 20s, early 90s, he longs for this freedom from materialism, freedom from comfort. And so he's in his early 20s, he donates all his money to savings. I think he gives it to Oxfam, he burns some of his cash. He rejects the conventional path his parents were on. He was a really intelligent guy. And he says, I'm just going to have unencumbered freedom. I'm just going to go out there. So he did 2 years wandering around America. I think he was like in Georgia area, and he just pottered about for 2 years. He'd drive his car for eventually, but that eventually broke down. He just took lift, stayed at a farm for a few weeks. And the movie's lovely. I'm just like watching this. I think newly married is always like, this is amazing. I love this. And it kind of, something in me just drew me to the splendid isolation. Wow, he could just, and the chats he has with people, and he moves on to the next thing. But he was I think his aim was he was going to go to Alaska. This was his sort of thing. So he worked his way up over 2 years. And he meets different people on the way. He has these sort of deep connections, but always these connections break because he has to move on to the next bit of freedom. And he makes all these different kind of friendships, a romantic friendship, friends. And he eventually meets this old man, lovely guy. And the two of them kind of clash at the start, and then they become a really close friendship. And I just want to show you a clip here because this is the old man driving him to the sort of the end of the road for him to then go off and hike. I just want you to see what you think of this idea of the balance of freedom and love.
Well, my friend.
Yup.
I had an idea. You know, my mother was an only child, and so was my father, and I was their only child. So when I'm gone, I'm the end of the line. My family will be finished. What do you say you let me adopt you? I could be, say, your grandfather.
Could we talk about this when I get back from Alaska? Would that be okay?
Yeah. We can do that, yeah.
All right, Ron. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe it's me, maybe it's being male, maybe being a bit introverted, maybe being laid back. Or maybe there's a bit of a hint of insecurity that if I get close to people too much, what will they see? So maybe it's easier just to sort of just tap superficially with relationships, but embrace my freedom. And whenever these moments come of connection, yeah, maybe can we talk about that when I get back from Alaska? And this film is based on a true story. And Chris gets to Alaska. And he lasts, I think, about 6-7 months, but unfortunately he dies out there. Just because he was living off the wild and he wasn't that experienced. And there's different stories of people giving out about that. But when the trappers eventually found his body, they found different books, and he had a diary. And one of his last entries, he wrote this down. He said that happiness is only real when shared. For me, and maybe not for everybody, because maybe that's like a no-brainer, for that draw of the splendid isolation, that protection that freedom can give us, we trade that, I suppose. We say it's a net gain overall. I'll kind of lose out on maybe deep connections and friendships, but at least I get my freedom. I will get a sense of security, but at least I won't get that vulnerability. And C.S. Lewis said this. He said, to love at all is to be vulnerable. Love anything, and your heart will be wrung and possibly broken. If you want to make sure of keeping it intact, you must give it to no one, not even an animal. Wrap your heart carefully around with hobbies and little luxuries. Avoid all entanglements. Lock it up safe in the casket or coffin of your selfishness. But in that casket, safe, dark, motionless, airless, it will change. It won't be broken. It'll become unbreakable, impenetrable, and irredeemable. Paul is saying our freedom isn't for building walls around our hearts, but it's for opening doors and connecting and letting go of this need to just disconnect and embrace this sort of idea of freedom. For you were called to freedom, brothers and sisters. Only do not use your freedom as an opportunity for self-indulgence, but through love become slaves to one another. For the whole law is summed up in a single commandment. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. The struggle. These two will be a bit quicker, so don't worry, it's getting hot. Verse 16. Live by the Spirit, I say, and do not gratify the desires of the flesh. For what the flesh desires is opposed to the Spirit, and what the Spirit desires is opposed to the flesh. For these are opposed to each other, to prevent you from doing what you want. But if you are led by the Spirit, you are not subject to the law. And the works of the flesh are obvious: fornication, impurity, licentiousness, idolatry, sorcery, enmities, strife, jealousy, anger, quarrels, dissensions, factions, envy, drunkenness, carousing, and things like these. You could probably go on, I'd say. I'm warning you, as I've warned you before, those who don't do such things will not inherit the kingdom of God. This is a real example, isn't it, of freedom without love that just becomes as chaos. Just a couple of things. There's a whole sermon series on this struggle. But it's really important. The word flesh here that Paul's using, it's sarx is a Greek word, which literally does mean flesh. So he's using this as a metaphor, like we would say, well, I've used it before, heart. When I say I love you with all my heart, I'm actually talking about my actual organ of my heart. No, so he's saying there's something about flesh here. And some of the ideas, and I think Dallas Willard and a few of these people really helped me with this, but it's this idea, it's our human frailty. It's just it's our body. It's our body habits. It's our patterns that go over our life. It's our default sort of physical reaction to things. And it's not wrong. It's not our whole nature, but it's just that sort of mindset that we've adapted. It's aspects probably from our upbringing. It's aspects of our personality. It's aspects of our brain, how it's evolved. It's all these things is what the flesh is. And then I suppose the Spirit, pneuma, we sung it today. It's your breath in our lungs. It's this, again, the word pneuma means breath. So again, another metaphor. And so I suppose it's that thing that gives life. It's the internal, it's the invisible aspect of ourselves. You can see how one's very external, the flesh, and it's very obvious, and then it's the internal subtlety. But without that, without the breath, nothing works. And this idea sometimes is very hard for translators. What's God's spirit? What's our spirit? And there's all sorts of, because it's hard to know pneuma, but it's this idea, I suppose, our spirit is that kind of central part of our human being. It's when we want to do something, when it really drives us, it's our passions to do something. That's sort of our spirit, that's doing it. And then when you got God is God's spirit, it's the same thing. It's God's sort of central aspect. And when his spirit comes into our spirit, there's this great driving force. And I love the way is Jesus talking to Peter when he let him down. He wouldn't be able to, I think, pray all night when Peter asked him. Jesus said this great idea. He said, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. Do you remember that kind of phrase? And it's really important that Jesus is saying the spirit is willing and the flesh is wrong. He's just saying it's weak. We can all relate to this. I think Paul's saying the struggle. We've got parts of us, our spirit part is like, I don't want to shout at my kids. I do want to be more vulnerable and connect with more people. I don't want to get anxious and doubt God. I don't want to lust. I don't want to waste my time. But then I do. And you see this in Romans, you see this in Galatians, you see it all the time, this tension between this battle between what we want to do, but we don't do it. And the things that we don't want to do, we do, this battle. And I think how we understand that, how we figure out this struggle, I think is we use the metaphor of fruit that Paul uses here. And we'll just go into this for a little bit, and then we can get an understanding of how this change happens. So by contrast, the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, exactly what we sung today, patience, kindness, generosity, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. There is no law against such things, and those who belong to Christ Jesus have crucified the flesh with its passions and desires. If we live by the Spirit, let us be guided by the Spirit. Let us not become conceited, competing against one another, envying one another. Again, this battle here, but this idea. I think it's really helpful because I love the metaphor of growth and fruit, because this is what Jesus uses, this is what the Old Testament uses. This is the sort of the metaphor how change happens. I think living in the post-industrial age, we think of computer chips, not seeds. We think of manufacturing, not in a factory or in a chip plant, not growing a vegetable. And so think about this organics idea of change. The seed, it's full of potential. A tiny little seed is incredible what it can do. We know that with an oak tree, with a tomato plant that my daughter Phoebe's growing. Tomato seeds are tiny. And the seed is like God's Spirit coming into us. So here's a kind of picture, again, from Dallas Willard. It's quite hard to see, but you've got inside, which is the will, is our spirit. And this is the aspect that's willing. We want to change. We want to do those things. And then outside, that's kind of what our flesh is. It's made up of maybe 4 things. Our flesh is made up of our feelings, our emotions. It's made up of our body, our physical central nervous system, our body. It's made up, we're social beings, how we interact socially, and it's made up with our thoughts. And so what often happens when we want to do something, which is the spirit, these 4 other aspects will get in the way. I think one of the greatest spiritual disciplines for our body is getting sleep. Have you tried to love someone when you've only had 1 hour sleep? Have you tried to be patient? So you could be saying, and like Jesus saying, Peter, like, come on, stay awake. I want to stay awake and pray. I want to do an all-nighter and pray for your God, but my body. Feelings, emotions, they're incredible servants. Emotions tell us how we're feeling. It's like an alarm clock. It gives us emotion. It moves us. But emotions can be great servants, but terrible masters. I don't feel like praying today. I don't feel like loving that person today. The flesh is weak, but the spirit is willing. And so how change happens isn't keep trying harder. No, I just need to love God more. I just need to believe God more. I need to just stop worrying. I need to stop being angry. That won't work. Have you ever someone told you, you just don't worry about that. Doesn't happen. Don't get angry about that. Doesn't work. What you have to do, you have to go indirect, which is these 4 aspects here. That's why we sing worship. We use our body to worship. We use our lungs to sing words out. And actually these thoughts. So if you're having anger issues or you're having all sorts of issues, by worshiping God, by singing, indirectly over time, change will happen. There's so much we can talk about that, but we know it's the indirect things that will eventually bring change happen. So we cultivate, we don't manufacture change. It takes time though. You know, I'll put it back in a minute, sorry. So my daughter Phoebe has grown a tomato plant, and I'm not a gardener at all. It's taken ages, hasn't it, Phoebe? It's taken I think it's taken about 100-something days. It's taken ages. There might be changes, and I know Rebecca's talked about that sense that God's saying, look, you're trying to work out a puzzle, trying to make change. There's no change happened. I've walked through a friend of mine who's been struggling with such anxiety for such a long time. And it's so lovely to see now some of the fruit of peace coming into his life now. It does take time to change. And he knew he couldn't just stop at being anxious. He had to try different things of those 4 things. But this gives hope that change will happen. The fruit metaphor is saying change and growth is inevitable. Once you cultivate, once you have a few of the basic things, and I'm not a gardener, Phoebe's a pretty good gardener. We grew this plant, we didn't know what we were doing, we didn't look up any instructions, we just watered it. And this plant grew, and now we have a few tomatoes. It's amazing. Change is amazing. And God's Spirit is in us. If you just say, yes, God, I want your Spirit in me, it'll just be a seed initially, and then bit by bit, things will begin to grow. And if you cultivate, things will grow. So I want to pray that as you watch this little time lapse of growth, that the God of all joy, of all peace, and of all hope will give you hope for for this season, that things you're battling with, changes that you're struggling with in your lives, puzzles you can't work out, that fruit is on its way. It might take a lot longer than you think. I want to read out the Message version of this as well. Is there audio for that? But what happens, just put it down a little bit, thanks, when we live God's way? God brings gifts into our lives, much the same that fruit appears in an orchard. Things like affection for others, exuberance about life, serenity. We develop a willingness to stick with things, a sense of compassion in the heart, and a conviction that a basic holiness permeates things and people. We find ourselves involved in loyal commitments, not needing to force our way in life, able to marshal and direct our energies wisely. Since this is the kind of life we have chosen, the life of freedom, the life of the Spirit, let us make sure that we do not just hold it as an idea in our heads or a sentiment in our hearts, but work out its implications in every detail of our lives. That means we will not compare ourselves with each other as if one of us were better and another worse. We have far more interesting things to do with our lives. Each of us is an original. May God's Spirit give you freedom afresh today. May God's Spirit give you courage to be vulnerable. And may God's Spirit give you hope that fruit is on its way. Amen.